All right, here we go. Welcome to the LA Soccer Hub Show. My name is Gio Garcia. Today is Friday, January 15th. Can't believe we're already 2 weeks into the new year. A lot of crazy things have happened for this new year. But, we're here to talk some soccer. And today we're talking to LAFC. LAFC have made a lot of moves this past week, some that we knew. And, they came out with the splash with Corey Baird, who came from RSL. And they officially made the announcement of Kim Moon-Hwan, the right back that's coming to join them as well. And here to help me talk about it all, we got LA Times soccer reporter Kevin Baxter. Kevin, how you doing?
All right. How are you?
Pretty good, man. We got a lot of things going on. How was your week and what you got going on this weekend?
Well, this weekend we got to prepare for the U.S. Women's National Team. They're how their first game of the new year on Monday, and so we'll be previewing them over the weekend.
That's right. That's right. And I saw what's her name? She got COVID recently. Alex
Alex
Morgan,
Morgan.
right? She's not
Yeah,
going to be there.
she's not. She didn't go to camp. She's only played 45 minutes in the last year. Actually, 45 minutes since the World Cup. So that's been a year and a half now. She was pregnant first, had the baby in May, came back and played 45 minutes in their friendly during the fall in the Netherlands. And now coming back from England, she was playing at Tottenham, coming back from England for Christmas holidays. She had a party or an event with her family and wound up with COVID. So that's not good.
Yeah. No, hopefully I did see that. I think she tweeted that out, but hopefully speedy recovery. So she just pretty much went out to Tottenham just to collect just for exposure, make some more money, and then come back.
Well, there are six national team players in Europe right now. There are five, I believe. There were five in England. Christian Press, Tobin Heath, Sam Mewis, Rose Lavelle, and then Alex Morgan. They went partly because of COVID. They wanted to get away from the U.S. where it was blowing up, and the NWSL situation. They played in a bubble, but they wound up without any infection, so it was actually very successful. But I think the women were a little bit scared of that. They wanted to challenge themselves. I'm not sure how much more money they get because they're all national team players. They're guaranteed at least $100,000. Most of them, in the case of Alex Morgan, make close to a $250,000 from their soccer, and then they have endorsements and other things. So I'm not sure how much money played into it, but I do think they wanted to challenge themselves. They wanted to give the Women's Super League a try, and they wanted to get away from COVID. And it's strange that Alex Morgan goes to England to get away from COVID and winds up catching it when she comes back. But that's why she's sidelined. She did say she is coming back to the Orlando Pride for the NWSL season, so she's not going back to England. She played, I believe, 5 games for Tottenham.
Well, that's exciting. Always to get the exposure. I know that was a big splash when she went out there. I even saw her. There was a picture of her, Jose Mourinho, talking with each other. So, I mean, it's exciting. That the U.S. women's national team is that big, is that popular, and obviously known around the world. But let's get into some LAFC, some black and gold signings. So we'll just go over the first signing that they did. They signed Corey Baird. I apologize if I butcher his last name. So here's a transaction. They got him from Real Salt Lake in exchange for $500,000 in general allocation money, GAM, spread across 2021 and 2022, and also 2021 international roster slot and future considerations. What do you think of this move? And also what LAFC had to give up to get him?
Well, it's a good move depending. It's a good move if you're looking for him to be a backup. I mean, Moose was sort of the backup forward last year. Got a lot of playing time because Diego Rossi and Brian Rodriguez went away on international duty, and then they came down with COVID, and Carlos Vela was injured. And I think LAFC realized they needed a little bit more depth up front. And that's where Corey Baird really fits in because he can play anyone. Bob Bradley uses a 4-3-3, and he needs 3 forwards. Baird can play anywhere. He can play on the left wing, the right wing. He can play in the middle. He's very versatile, and that's what LAFC needs. He's essentially the 4th forward. He would be one of the first guys off the bench. So if Brian Rodriguez, needs a blow or those guys are on international duty, he's the guy that can step in. You remember LAFC lost Bradley Wright Phillips, who they did not re-sign, and then Diomandi went back to Norway in August. So they needed some depth. Danny was good, but I don't think he was sufficient. I think they needed a little bit more cover. And that's where Baird is going to help. The problem with Baird is I've heard some people talk about, well, maybe if Rossi or Brian Rodriguez leaves for Europe, which they want to do, that Baird can step in. I don't see that. I don't think Baird is a regular. I think he's a backup. I think he's a sub. And you look at his production. He was MLS Rookie of the Year in 2018, but his production's gone down every year. That first season, he had 8 goals and 5 assists and was Rookie of the Year. Second season, he had five goals and 4 assists. So you see it's going down. Last year in 22 games, he had 2 goals and 4 assists. So reduction has dropped, and he's only going to be 5. Turns 20 January 30th. So he's a young guy. I just don't think that on a team with the last 2 Golden Boot winners, I don't think he's going to light it up. He's going to be a guy that's going to step in and score a ton of goals. But I do think he's an adequate backup, and I think that's what his role would be. And I think when you look at the price they paid for him, when Salt Lake let him go, I don't think Salt Lake thought he was a future starter for them. And when you look at what LAFC paid for him, I think LAFC got value. It's not the kind of trade that when you look at the money that changed hands, I don't think that's the kind of deal you make for a starter.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't think he's going to come off the bench necessarily. I think this is the way I guess I'm reading it is they're assuming either Rossi or Brian Rodriguez is gonna leave. That's I think that's how I would take it with the assumption, and they're gonna have him, and also we know that BWP left, so that also comes into play. And I agree with your point. Danny Masevsky, towards the end of the year last season, he struggled just to get his rhythm, but when he's in rhythm, we can see what he can produce. But I think they gave up a lot. They gave up a lot if he's going to come off the bench. All that. I think, and I agree with his production. I think I guess the optimism that I'm hearing from some of the LAFC people is that the way they were announcing it. You had a lot of people. Even LAFC Rich was trying to do a puzzle type of thing so people could figure out who it was. But I think there's a lot of optimism from the LAFC people that I'm hearing, and there's a lot of optimism that this could potentially be. He not just only plays striker, but he also, from what I've read and what I've seen, from obviously from his highlights, that he also can play in the wing. And, I think that's what LAFC like, that he has that flexibility. He's not just like, Danny Masevsky or BWP. They only play as a number 9. He can also play on the right wing, if Brian Rodriguez doesn't come back or they trade him, or the same thing with Rossi, they're able to put him out on the wing, or, if they want Vela out on the wing, or if they want Baird as the number 9, or Danny Masevsky comes in and he plays the number 9, and you have Baird on the right-hand side or left-hand side. I think they really do like the flexibility that Baird brings. And I'm with you. His production has gone down every year, but I think what I'm assuming they're thinking is like, hey, we bring him into our system. We're going to get the best out of our system. We got the best out of BWP. This guy is 24. He's about to be 25 years old. We can integrate him. We can show him the way. We can show him the LAFC way. And we can have him for years to come. That's the way I see it. And I think that's the way I think LAFC people are starting to see. But you with all that everything that they gave up, you have to get the best out of Corey Baird.
Well, I think if they're looking at him to be a guy that starts and starts 25 or 30 games, I think they're going to be disappointed, because I don't, Brian Rodriguez, for all of his faults, he was still a teenager last year, and he led the team in assists. Diego Rossi is the Golden Boot winner. If either one of those guys go to Europe, I don't think Corey Baird steps in and has the same kind of production. I don't think he takes their place. I think he's a great fourth forward. I just don't see him, with the kind of production that they would need to replace Diego Rossi and Brian Rodriguez. Maybe, and if either one of those two leaves, maybe you don't replace that production. But when you look at the money that LAFC is spending, they did spend $500,000 on Corey Baird. They did spend need allocation money to get Kim Moon-Hwan. It does kind of suggest that perhaps there is a European deal for one of those players coming up that LAFC will get some money back for, because I'm not quite sure where all this money is coming. They owe a lot of money to people already on the payroll, and that's why they let Bradley Wright Phillips go. That's one of the reasons they let him go, and they didn't sign a couple other guys. So I'm wondering if there is a deal in the works, and if there is, I just don't see Corey Baird as a guy that's going to step in and again have the production of a Diego Rossi or a Brian Rodriguez.
I think he can do what. Yeah, I think he could do. It's not hard to do what Brian Rodriguez do. The assists. I mean, Brian Rodriguez is very talented. It is very hard to do what Diego Rossi did, the Golden Boot winner, and and impact the game that he did. So I can see him doing similar or better than Brian Rodriguez. I can't see him doing better than Diego Rossi. And I'm with you. I think there is something in the works there. One of those two players mainly because there's a lot of money, that they're dishing out in order to get these players. And if we see how the LAFC system runs, I think this is one player that's going to give them that flexibility to play to be able to play all three positions whenever they may need Corey Baird to do that because going into the 2021 season, whenever that starts, you're gonna have international call-ups, U23. You're gonna have a lot of roster changes, and I think he brings in some of the depth. Obviously, we got to see the production and how he does in the 2021 season. But like I said, I think there's a lot of optimism there with Corey Baird. Now we just have to see how the chips fall because they definitely gave up a lot to get him and to bring him here to the LAFC. Let's talk about Kim Moon-Hwan. So we know that they signed him off using target allocation money. He obviously will occupy an international spot. And he also, they're just waiting on his ITC, his international transfer certification, and he will, also need to use a visa. What I'm told about, I had Steve Hahn from Go On here, and what I was told about his transaction was that he was making about $600,000 as a right back for his previous club, Busan. So I'm assuming Kim Moon-Hwan is going to make about the same. I expect him to make less than that. So that was also a lot of money. If the reports and everything is accurate, that is a lot of money to bring in Kim Moon-Hwan. But I know there's a lot with that as well with the fan base and everything else. But what do you make of Kim Moon-Hwan, the addition of Kim Moon-Hwan, but also the transaction if they're going to have to pay him $600,000?
Well, it's interesting because they let Steve Betishore go before last season. He was making less than 300,000, right at 300,000, so making half that. He was older; he was 7 years older. They let him go, and the right back experiment just did not work. They wanted Andy Nahar to play that position, and Andy Nahar just never got healthy. They wound up using Latif Blessing, a midfielder, at right back more than any other player. They really needed to address that situation. And so I do think that LAFC was a little too optimistic about Nahar and his availability. Now they wind up paying twice as much as the guy they had there in 2018 and 19. The 600, we know that allocation money was used in the deal. We don't know where it was used. I don't know if it was a free transfer or some of that allocation money paid for the transfer. You can use it that way as well. If that's true that he made 600,000, certainly you would think he'd be making about that here. He is a young player. He has 11 international caps with the Korean national team, so that's good. He was playing his club history, though. He was playing mostly for most of his career in the second division in K-League 2. His team Busan moved up to K-League 1 this last season. They only won 5 games. They were relegated again. So he doesn't have a ton of first division experience. So there's going to be a learning curve with him coming here. But he is a right back. He is a right back that joins the attack, sort of a Alphonso Davies type outside back that is going to be very offensive, but can also is fast enough where he can get back. I say all that to say that he fits nicely in Bob Bradley's system. He's exactly the kind of right back that Bob Bradley wants. And it's definitely an upgrade to what they had last year. I think Latif Blessing did the best that he could, but he's not a right back. He's a midfielder, and he got caught sometimes pushing forward, which you can understand. So I think this was a necessary move. I think when you look back at the what LAFC tried to do last season, they wound up overpaying for that position. But if this guy proves to be able to make the transition, he's the 5th Korean now to come to MLS. And a lot of people in MLS are talking about the Korean market as a place teams will go in the future. The Latin American market, I'm told by some GMs, is just way too heated. People are asking for way too much money because so many MLS teams that went down there and signed so many players that a lot of the agents now are overvaluing their clients. So I think you're going to see a lot more people going to Korea. It's a place with a soccer tradition. You know, they've made the last 9 World Cups. So it's a place with a soccer culture and a soccer tradition, and the players are uh, not cheap, but they're not overpriced. Um, so we'll see. I mean, I think it's an upgrade. I think it's going to help. I do think the transition to a first division league, it could be a little tough.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting. I like the move. I like the move. I think when I had Steve Hahn here a couple weeks ago, what he told me was that Kim Moon-Hwan doesn't really. He's not a. He plays for the national team, but he's not the number one guy. He comes off the bench. But he said, in the Korean perspective, if Kim Moon-Hwan does not start for LAFC, it would look at as somewhat as a failure if he did not come in and start every single game for LAFC. And that's what people in the Korean and where he's coming from. Like, obviously, I don't have that much knowledge, and that's why I had him. There's some expectation from the Korean side for him to come and be the number one guy at right back. And if that's the case, you see LAFC how much they're going to be having to dish out. It was more than 600,000. So that just asked the question to me is like, where does Tristan Blackman go? Because he was the guy that finished off the season as right back. He looked good, and he also got a U.S. men's national team call up, which we'll talk about later. So I just wonder where Tristan Blackman goes. Because if Jesus Mourinho, which they still haven't officially announced that, and they're still in talks with him about bringing him to the 2021. They said that he's still in the plans for 2021. It makes me wonder one or two things: either Jesus Mourinho, they're not going to pay for him, and he's not going to come back, or it's just going to be Eddie Segura and Jesus Mourinho at center back, and Tristan Blackman may have to come off the bench and be a substitute for them either at center back or right back. Do you see it that way?
I think Blackman's future position, I think it's going to be at center back. So I think he's going to be competing there. I expect that he's going to probably play a little bit of both with the national team, but I don't know that. I mean, he's a young player. To me, he doesn't seem to have a long-term future with the national team. Although this is going to be a strange year for the national team. They have Nations League in March. If they play all these things because of COVID, they have a Nations League in March, Gold Cup in the summer. They have 8 World Cup qualifiers in the fall. They'll have a number of friendlies along the way. They need a deep pool, and I think Tristan Blackman will have a chance as a young player to prove himself. But at center back, they got Walker Zimmerman, Matt Miazga, they got John Brooks. They have a ton of players at center back. They also very deep at right back, with Serginho Dents and Reggie Cannon, Tyler Adams, an outside back. They're very deep, and so I think it's going to be a tough row for him to hold. And with the national team, with LAFC, I think I see him at center back. I think that LAFC now all of a sudden they appear to be, if everybody comes back, they appear to be fairly deep on the defensive line, where on the back line, where last year, that's especially at the start of the season, they weren't. Now they have Kim, they have Diego Palacios and Segura coming back, and Blackman. I would expect Jordan Harvey's not coming back, but they also have Marco Farfan, who's only 22, a very experienced player with Portland. The defensive line looks good. And it's going to be a real battle for those starting spots. Even a guy like you just mentioned, Tristan Blackman. Here's a guy in national team camp, probably going to play in their friendly at the end of this month, and he's coming to his club team and he has to fight for a position. So that's kind of a good situation to be in.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you. And I think that's if you're LAFC, that's what you want to do. You want to bring in depth, and you also want guys to fight out for the position, right? And I think that Tristan Blackman is definitely one of those guys that's going to have to fight for his position because with the new signings, and Jesus Mourinho, and we know what Eddie Segura can do. So I think if he doesn't start, he's going to be a great player to come off the bench, and and everything seems to be going in LAFC's way of them building up the back line, because they had so many issues last year in that back line, and it's great to see them bring in those reinforcements. But I also want to go back a little bit into Kim, and I think you're right. LAFC targeting the Korean market is very smart on their part, because they did that with their fan base before they even got a Korean player. But the way they keep, I think that I read, I don't want to misquote here, but they want to. I think LAFC is known that they want a club that represents the city. We saw what they did with the first signing of Carlos Vela. Bringing South American players, and now seeing bringing in Kim Moon-Hwan, who plays for the Korean national team, and how big that fan base is in LA. And you got Koreatown, and LA is, if not the biggest, one of the biggest South Korean populations outside of Korea. And I think it's just an exciting time if you're from South Korea, or you're Korean or Asian, right? You'll have someone that looks like you. You have someone that, like, hey, that guy looks like me, or that he plays for LAFC, and that just gives I feel like LAFC a little bit more ammo to bring in new fan, and also really really target the Korean market, and bring in new fans, and some fans that may be underrepresented. And I think that that's exciting for MLS, that's exciting for LAFC. And I think that's also, if the way thing hopefully how things go with Kim, you could start seeing a potential trend of bringing Korean players to MLS.
Well, that trend's already started. Seattle Sounders won a MLS Cup in 2019 with a Korean player.
But in LA though, I'm talking specifically
Yeah,
in LA, like
and
the amount of noise LAFC is making with Kim, you know, they're really targeting the Korean fans, as they should be.
well, the first Korean player that came to MLS back in 2003 played for the Galaxy. So they've been in LA before, Korean players.
But
But
not like this though. But not with the hype
well,
and
I think you might be overplaying this. I mean, they're not going to sign a guy who can't play. I mean, they
yeah, of
tried it
course.
with Rudolfo Zelaya. They brought Rudolfo Zelaya in, and it was like, here's a Salvadoran. There's the largest Salvadoran market outside El Salvador is in LA. The largest Korean
But he
market
was also
outside
past his
Korea
prime though.
is in LA. They have more Koreans in LA than anywhere outside the Korean peninsula. The more Salvadorans in LA than anywhere outside San Salvador. So when they brought Zelaya in, they did the same thing. It was a big deal. Zelaya was not a good player, and they let him go at the end of the season. If Kim is not a good player, all that marketing doesn't work. I talked to some Asian American soccer fans after Kim's signing, and they all made the same point. It's great to see him here, but if he doesn't play, it's going to be very disappointing. It's going to be more embarrassing. I think there's more to it. Yes, LAFC wants a team that reflects its market, but I think there's more to it than that. Yes, they signed Carlos Vela. He was their first player. But Diego Rossi and Brian Rodriguez are Uruguayan. There's not a ton of Uruguayans here. They're good players. They were signed because they're good players. We have they just went out and signed recently Apoku. He comes from Ghana, and I talked to Bob Bradley about that, and they scouted him in Ghana, and they're looking to make inroads into the African market. And Bob Bradley talked about, we're going wherever we can find players, and we're scouting wherever we can find players. He didn't mention the Ghana community here in Southern California. He mentioned signing a good player. So yeah, if you're looking at, say, Kim and a player from Canada, then yeah, if they're both equal, you probably sign Kim, because there's those additional things. And LAFC is very much into that community fan base thing. But they didn't sign Kim because he's Korean. They signed him because he's a good player who happens to be Korean, and then they'll market him after that. But I don't think.
Well,
I don't think so. Well, I don't think someone's pulling up a census form and saying, "Hey, there's a lot of Chinese here. Let's go out and get a Chinese."
no, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. I'm just saying that that's what the LAFC has said, that they want to bring in they want a team that represents the city. That's what they've said. That's not coming from me. But they've also, they've made their own Korean collection, right? And I'm with you that he has to play and he has to be effective. But I think this is going hand in hand with what they want to do with the Korean market. I understand what you're saying about the Ghanaian players and everything like that, but this to me really seems to be like, hey, it's a double win if it works. And if it doesn't, I understand. But I think with the amount of money that they're dishing out to bring him here, and the way they're marketing him out, obviously we haven't seen him play. We haven't, he for all we know, he could just be a bust, and the worst thing could happen to LAFC. But I think what they're trying to do is, they're trying to win on both ends. They're trying to win on bringing in more fans that are unrepresented, that LAFC may feel that it's unrepresented. And if Kim Moon-Hwan can win, the South Koreans and some of those Asian fans over LAFC, I think that's a win-win situation. And I'm with you. I mean, he has to play. He has to know how to play. But I'm not in the belief that LAFC only signed this player because he's Korean. But you did see John Thornton reach out. I had Stevon. He said he reached out to his one of his former teammates and asked him, who is a really good, right back and defensive end. So they were looking at getting a Korean player. And I don't know the depth to it. I don't know it's because I have to assume is because of the Korean market. They got some Korean people working in their organization. They want to win over that fan base even more, and I think that Kim has a lot to do with that. That was just my point on that.
Yeah, well, I've talked to GMs in Seattle and elsewhere who signed other Korean players, and Seattle has a huge Korean market. Certainly, Vancouver does, and they got a little bit of a bounce. But they said that was not the main reason for LA maybe that wasn't the main reason for this. Korean now is a good market. It's a soccer culture. The league, the K League is similar, competitively to MLS. It's not like coming from the Premier League where players feel like they're stepping down, or coming from maybe a league in some places in South America, maybe Ecuador, where they feel like it's a big step up. It's more of a lateral move. Busan needed to get rid of Kim because he, as you said, making 600,000. They're going back down to the second division. They couldn't afford to keep him. So, the Korean players apparently are valued about where MLS thinks they should be paid. And I talked to Bruce Arena when he took over at New England, and he told me that we talked about MLS's push into the South American market, and you see all the players that have come up. LAFC has Rossi. LAFC has 4 national team players off South American teams, and Rui Diaz and Ladero and Pity Martinez and all these players that have come up. It's just in Bruce Arena's mind, it's just too much too soon. And many agents now are starting to understand that South American players are the flavor of the month in MLS, and they're asking for too much. So now, LAFC and others have gone to Korea where they think they get value and they're not overpriced. So we'll see. I mean, certainly, I think Kim could do both things. I think he could definitely make inroads into the Korean market, but that's not going to pay off in ticket sales this year because we may not have fans this year.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm with you. It may not, but to the shirts and everything they're promoting, that may help him on that. But at the end of the day, he has to perform. Whether they got him, he has to perform. So let's move on. Another interesting player that LAFC is being rumored is goalkeeper Tomas Romero. Stephen Goff reported this. He said LAFC are close to deal with Philadelphia Union for rights to homegrown goalkeeper Tomas Romero, Georgetown sophomore and Salvadoran youth international who helped Georgetown to 2019 NCAA title. He also says it's unclear whether he will sign right away. What do you make about this potential goalkeeper signing? We know, what I should say first, we know LAFC don't really have a number one. We know they have Pablo Cisnegas and Kenneth Vermeer, but towards the end of the season, Pablo Cisnegas was playing most of the games, and then CONCACAF came, and Kenneth Vermeer got the start. I know a lot of fans are upset with the goalkeeper position because they don't have a clear number one. Some people believe it should be Kenneth. Some people should believe it should be Pablo. A lot of people thought, they may go out and go get a goalkeeper, a number one goalkeeper. If that's not the case, this looks like to be a backup signing. So and he's a homegrown player, right, from Philadelphia Union. What do you make about this potential signing?
Yeah, he's a backup player. He's only 20. He's played 17 games in the USL Championship. Has never played in MLS. Just fresh out of college. Goalkeeper is one position where you might be able to play a 20-year-old striker or a 20-year-old midfielder. Very few 20-year-old goalkeepers start because it's a position where it's based on experience and anticipation, and that's why you see goalkeepers playing into their late 30s, because it's a position where you need to do your apprenticeship. And so he's a backup. He's maybe a guy they're thinking about for the future. But goalkeeper is a very interesting position for LAFC, and I think one they need to address. Vermeer apparently is signed on a multi-year deal, a very expensive multi-year deal. If they can't get rid of him on loan or whatever, I think they're stuck with him. And I just don't see Kenneth Vermeer as the goalkeeper of the future. I think he was very iffy last year. He gave up, during the regular season, he gave up 2 goals a game, which is not good. And, even though LAFC did not concede a lot in Champions League. I thought the goalkeeping situation, he looked very iffy. He looked really shaky. Um, I just don't see them being confident with Vermeer going forward. So I think Cisniega is going to start camp as the starter. And he was good at times and bad at times. I just think he was very inconsistent. So LAFC spent a ton of money and a ton of attention on their back line. They need to address goalkeeper, because you can have all these great defenders, and if the ball gets through them and goes in the goal, it doesn't help you. So they need to address the situation at goalkeeper. I don't know that the team feels really confident with either Cisniega or Kenneth Vermeer. But both of them are tied up contractually. So I don't know. Do you go out and get a third goalkeeper and then have Romero as a backup to them? The other thing is LAFC doesn't have a USL championship team like Galaxy do. So you bring in a guy like Romero, and he's third on your depth chart, but he's 20 and he needs that experience we talked about. They're going to have to loan him out somewhere. He's going to have to go somewhere to play, because I just don't see him playing over Vermeer or Cisniega right now. And if both of those guys are on the team, Romero's going to have to go somewhere to play.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting signing. Right, if he's a player, a goalkeeper that they may have for the future, or whatever, but it's like I'm with you. They haven't addressed it, and I think if you have two goalkeepers, you don't have one goalkeeper. Kind of like the saying. It may be different because in football they say you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one quarterback, and I think they've been, I really thought Pablo Cisneros was going to be the number one after he started the playoff game and everything for them. And then going into CONCACAF, we saw Kenneth Vermeer, and Bob Bradley said that, that they saw his experience in CONCACAF at the start of the year. And that's what they went. I'm just paraphrasing here. And that's why they went with that decision to start Kenneth Vermeer. And like you said, they spent a lot of money on Kenneth Vermeer, and, it's tricky because you have two about average, I guess you can say, goalkeepers, and they're two keepers that have been inconsistent, and you expected one of those two to be your keeper. Now you're in the offseason, you sign up a backup, like a third string goalkeeper. So to me, it tells me they're either gonna go with Paulo or Kenneth. And I think, I don't know if you're LAFC, you can continue to, go back and forth from Kenneth Vermeer and Pablo Cisneros. I get if there's an injury that makes sense. But, last year was because both of them were being very, very inconsistent. And if you have that I think this would be the third year, because you had something like that with Tyler Miller and Pablo Cisneros. And if you go into 2021 and you play this season going like that, again, I think that just a lot of inconsistency, and you're going to see the same thing. You don't have, you're not really going to have the confidence on one goalkeeper if you keep spinning it 50-50.
Well, I think barring another signing, I think Cisniega has to be the starter, and you have to show the confidence with him. Kenneth Vermeer is 35. He is not your long-term solution. Even if he were to start this year, that's not your guy for the future. It's Cisniega. Of the people on the roster right now, I think Cisniega is the guy for the short-term future, and you have to start him and let him get that experience. The thing I saw with Vermeer last year is he's 35, as I said, was the kind of goalkeeper Bob Bradley wanted. He plays out of the back. He's active. He's like an Edison with Manchester City or a Allison with Liverpool. He's almost like a sweeper keeper. Manuel Neuer. He comes out of the net. He comes way off his line a lot. Doesn't get involved in the attack, but certainly plays the ball well out of the back. That's what they wanted. The problem with Vermeer is, again, he's 35. And if you look at some of the plays that he made, he tried to play the way he used to play as a young player, but he's not the quick player he was then. So he gets caught out of position. He comes off his line, plays the ball, and he can't get back like he used to when he was younger. In his mind, he still feels like he's 25. His body is 35. So he gets caught out of position a lot. And the other thing he does is he tries to anticipate. There are some times when he realizes he's not as fast as he used to be. So he tries to anticipate. He expects a ball to go to his right, and he cheats that way, maybe even dives that way, and the ball goes back to the other side. And I think opponents have figured that out, and they hold on to the ball just a split second longer, wait for Vermeer to commit, and he's just too easy to beat to the other side. So I just don't see Vermeer as a guy that unless he comes to camp and he's a totally different guy. I don't see him getting a ton of minutes. I see Cisniega as the guy who you have to say, look, for right now, you're our guy. We want you in goal for most of our games, and we're going to commit to you. And I think you're right. If they don't, if they put Cisniega on the bench and he watches Vermeer out there, he's going to have to think, what's wrong with me? How bad am I if I can't play?
Yeah, and you know, if you're probably not starting, you also got to think like, how much longer do you really want to be there? Because you got to keep. I mean, it's the same situation. You know, going back and forth from both goalkeepers, and you know, I understand different things happen. And you know, last year was very crazy, but I think you know they need to solidify and you know have the trust in you know either Pablo or Kenneth. You know, and like I said, both of them have been very shaky, very inconsistent, and both of them have been great. It's good at times, and you know, made it some incredible saves that make you wonder, make you think, okay, he could be our number one goalkeeper. But you know, things happened last year that they went back and forth, and I just think going into this year, I think you would want to limit the back and forth between the goalkeepers if you're LAFC. You know.
Yeah, definitely. I think it, it's a position where it's a lot closer in baseball. You know, if the guy's confidence is shaken, he's not going to be as effective. And the best way to shake the goalkeeper's confidence is to tell him he's not playing. Then he wonders what's wrong.
Yeah.
Guy has to be out there and he has to be confident. He also has to know that the job's his, that he can make a mistake, not a ton of mistakes. He can make a mistake, and he's still going to be out there the next game. If a guy is worried that he has to be perfect, that's when he tries to be too good and he gets in a lot of problems. So
Yeah, it seems like they have a very thin rope on the goalkeeper situation, but you know they with good reason though as well. Next topic I want to talk about, which is the MLSPA just announced that Mark Anthony Kay has been selected to serve on the MLSPA on the executive board on a 3-year term. He will be joined by Victor Ulao and Jalil Anibaba. What do you make of this Mark Anthony Kay joining the executive board of the MLSPA, the Major League Soccer's Players Association?
I think that's a good move on the union's part. This is a very important period for the union. You know, they're now negotiating with MLS over another collective bargaining agreement. If they don't continue with the one they signed last June, this will be the third CBA in less than a year. Relations between the league and the players union is probably lower than it's ever been before, and that's saying a lot because there were almost 2 work stoppages in the last 11 years. So Mark Anthony Kay, I think he earned the right to do this. He was very outspoken participant in the Black Players Union when they adopted a number of different stances over the summer with Black Lives Matter. You know, the taking a knee before games, the demonstration we saw of unity before MLS's back tournament. Mark Anthony Kay was a big part of that, and I think he's earned the respect of the other players. And they need someone who is going to be a strong vocal advocate for them going into these new CBA talks. And it's good that Mark Anthony Kay is a relatively new player, you know, just in his 3rd year in MLS, because a lot of the veteran players look back at where they used to be with MLS, and that's fine. You know, the union has come a long way and the league has come a long way, but it's a different league now. I don't think you can go back and say, we should be happy with this because back in 2005, we were here. No, that's not the position that they should be taking. This is one of the top leagues in the world now. There's, you know, a lot of money involved, a lot of rich owners. And that's another thing that people have talked about. Well, when you look at the revenue stream for Major League Soccer, it's not good because of COVID, but a lot of these owners have a lot of money that they can spend if they really want to be part of this league and make it better. So I like Mark Anthony Kay. I think he's a very smart guy. I think he's very committed, and I think he's part of this new wave. And I think the union needs that to go forward. You know, the last group were people like Jeff Lorenowitz, who is a great guy and a very smart guy, but it's been around a long time. I think they need new blood to take this union forward, and I think Mark Anthony Kay is a good selection. He's got 3 years now, which is good because he's going to be thinking beyond just the next couple of weeks. He's going to be thinking in terms of 3 years.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, and I think this is a great move from Mark personally, and just you know just how vocal he's been, you know, with everything that went on last year. And I think if you're the MLSPA, you do need players that are going to be vocal, that are going to voice their opinion, and going to have the players back, especially you know when it comes to the owners. And right now with their negotiations, you know, we don't know if when this MLS season is going to start. They did say March. It could be pushed back, and you know, there's you know, I know there's been a lot of reports about you know what Don Garber said and then the MLSPA said, so they don't really look to be on the same page of what's going on. And we could definitely see the season getting pushed back from its initial start, which was first reported around March. But I think if you have a player like Mark Anthony Kay there, you can voice his opinion. You can probably bring the players together, bring some unity within the MLSPA and be able to have some leverage, against the owners, and tell them like, hey, no, this is what we want, or this is what we're looking for. That way, it's more of a 50-50.
Well,
Because I feel like right now the owners have more of the leverage right now. What do
here's
you say?
why I don't see the season starting in March. I know one of the arguments was that MLS wanted to have a long season because they were concerned about the 8 World Cup qualifiers, which doesn't just affect American players. That'll be in September, October, November. Yes, the majority of the U.S. national team that'll be playing in those World Cup qualifiers are going to come from Europe, but that's not true with Honduras or El Salvador or Trinidad and Jamaica. Those players come off MLS rosters, so you're going to have a situation if you have 8 World Cup qualifiers in the fall when the MLS playoffs are going on. Is a number of MLS teams will be missing their best players. That was the concern of MLS. Let's get as much of the season done as we can before all these players start going off to their international teams. But and that sounds good. And others were saying, no, we should push for a later start because the later we start, the better the chance we have of having fans in the stands. Anthony Fauci has said he doesn't believe that fans will be back to sporting events until the midsummer. If MLS waits, then they get more fans in the stands. That's why is that important? Because 95% of the revenue in MLS comes from game day sales, ticket sales, sponsorships, parking concessions, those kind of things. That's contingent on people being there. So those are the two arguments. Why do I think that MLS is tipping its hand and suggesting it'll be a later start? Because as we talk, it's January 15th. Last year, training camps were opening. I think the Galaxy opened around the 21st or 22nd. We don't even have a schedule yet. Schedules are always out by now. We don't even have a schedule yet. Nobody's being called into camp. You can't just say, hey, camp's going to open a week from now. Christian Pavon, come on up from Argentina. You can't do that because he's going to have to quarantine. He needs to get a visa. He needs to do all those things. So the fact that, and maybe that's happening behind the scenes, but, we haven't heard of one MLS player talking about getting ready to come to camp. So I just don't see them opening camp in a week from now. And if they don't open camp by the end of January, they don't start playing in March. So unless it's late, perhaps late March. Remember last year they opened the season on February 29th. It was the earliest opening in MLS history. They're certainly not going to open the last week in February, and I don't see the first week in March, perhaps late March. I just don't, again, we're talking on January 6th, 15th, and there's no start date for camp to open.
Yeah, and there's barely any movement, right, from the conversations that's been reported from the MLS, PA, and Don Garber, and what's going on. And it does make sense if they want to push it back, but 2021 is going to be such a jam-packed season that you also got to account that some players are not going to be there. And if it's a similar situation, obviously last year was because of COVID, and this year is because of international. Later this year for MLS playoffs, right? It's because of players being called up to the national team. There's going to be a lot of you don't want to have the quality of the game, not MLS not having the best players on the field. But I mean that is the. I mean I'm glad I'm not making those decisions, but I see it as a business. I see the business of MLS, but also see the other side, the player side, on what they may want, and wanting to start the season sooner, or wanting making sure certain things are guaranteed for them on their end. And it's very tricky, and I think we'll have to see how it plays out, because I'm with you. I think last season, like at the end of January, players are being called up, and different things. And you also wonder like how players are staying in shape, are they running, or what things are going on. Those things are going to be some worrisome if you don't have a start date, or any initial plan of when you plan to start, if you're the MLS or the league. But one player that is starting and is training right now is Tristan Blackman. I know we spoke about him. I just want to read a quote that he said on his call up to the men's national team. This is the first call up of hopefully many. I look forward to developing my relationship with the staff and the players, showing myself, and hopefully keep getting called back into camps and then into games. Um, I think that's a this is, like I said, this is a great call up for Tristan Blackman, and it also goes to show that Greg Berhalter is really paying attention to what players in the MLS do, and not only because, like we mentioned before, there is already a lot of depth at right back. There's already a lot of depth at center back, but I do like that Greg Berhalter is still calling players into camp, into the January camp, because you don't know what the future may hold. A player may get injured, something may happen, and you will have a player like Tristan Blackman that you get to one, build a relationship with them. You get to really see in your eyes, and you get to do the eye test, and what is he really good at? Where does he really play? Where is he better at right back? Is he better at center back? And if something were to happen, players down the line do get injured, you may call Tristan Blackman. You may call Tristan Blackman just to help you out with training, or as a sub. And I think if you're LAFC, this is the only LAFC player that's getting called up to the men's national team. I think it has to be exciting because his value is only going up.
Well, Greg Berhalter is looking toward the summer. The Gold Cup is not a FIFA tournament. Well, it is a FIFA tournament, but it doesn't take place on FIFA dates. So that means the national team players in Europe will not be participating, and ones outside MLS probably will not be participating. So Greg Berhalter needs to look at probably putting together 3 full teams. He's going to have his Nations League team in the spring. He's going to have the Gold Cup team, and then he's going to have the World Cup qualifying team. So that's 60 players pretty much that you need to have available on your talent pool. So yeah, he's definitely looking a little broader. Does Tristan Blackman have a future with perhaps the A team, the one that would go to the World Cup in 2022? Maybe not, but we would have said that about a lot of other players too if they hadn't gotten their first chance. We'll see how impressive Tristan Blackman is. I think right now he's looked at as depth, as someone that deepens that talent pool. But let's see what he does. Maybe he winds up being exactly the kind of guy that Greg Berhalter's looking for. And Greg Berhalter knows MLS as well. Remember, he was coach Columbus for a couple of years, made an MLS Cup final as coach there. Yes, certainly his A team is a European-based team, but he does not look down at MLS players and knows that there's some value there. I don't know where Tristan Blackman fits in, but the fact that he's getting a look certainly is positive.
Yeah, no, it's definitely positive, and just with everything going on. What do you think of LAFC, and so far of everything, all the moves they've made? I mean, they've addressed the back line. We talked about the goalkeeping. The midfield looks to be. I mean, that's where I felt they've always been the strongest. If this is the team, right, I think there is a few things that they're gonna have to adjust and do. If this is the team going into 2021 as of January 15th, what do you make of this team so far?
Well, I think they have more versatility up front, but less experience. I mean, Diomandi and Bradley Wright Phillips are gone. They've been replaced by Corey Baird and Danny Muscovy. So behind the starting 3, I think that's good. I think we have a front line now, a front 5, a little more versatile. Again, the midfield you mentioned, they probably have 5 starters for 3 spots. So I think they're good there. They're versatile there. They have a lot of options. The back line, they gave up 1.77 goals a game last season. That's a franchise high. Yes, they led the league in scoring again, but they also gave up more goals than they've ever given up before per game. So they needed to address the back line, and they did. And I think Marco Farfan is going to be a guy who we're going to be talking about before this is over. I think Kim is definitely an upgrade at right back. Tristan Blackman played good at the end of the season, played well at the end of the season, not so much the beginning. So I think he's moving in the right direction. They haven't addressed goalkeeper yet. And as we talked about, I don't think they can feel really good about the goalkeeping situation going into the year. I just don't see goalkeeper being a strength of this team. And maybe that's by design. Maybe they feel like they need to address other areas first. But unless Pablo emerges as a really top level goalkeeper, I still think it's got to be a question mark going into the season.
Yeah, yeah, I think so, and I'm with you on all that. They've addressed everything except goalkeeper, and I think I think they're gonna roll with what they got so far. Kevin, that is all the time we have. I appreciate you being on. I hope you have a great weekend, man. Yeah, when is the women's U.S. men's women's national team play?
Women play Monday against Colombia,
Monday.
Monday and
Monday.
Friday against Colombia. And the men will have a game next weekend, the weekend of the 23rd. We don't know against who, and we don't know exactly when. It hasn't been announced yet. That'll be
Yeah,
coming in a few days.
yeah. And the women over there, are they in Florida? I'm assuming.
They're in Orlando. The men are in Bradenton at the U.S. soccer facility there, and the women are in Orlando. They're training. They're using the Orlando Pride and Orlando City's facilities.
Yeah, so that should be exciting. Definitely gonna try to catch the U.S. Women's National game on Monday. Kevin, for the people that don't already follow you, let them know where they can follow you.
LATimes.com and on Twitter at KBaxter11.
Yeah, follow him, check him out. He wrote a great piece on Kim Moon-Hwan. Covers both LA teams. Great articles. Make sure once you click it the first time, you read it and understand it, because if you try to go back again, I think you have to pay.
That's okay. You can pay.
I get paid, but we're going through some tough times right now, Kevin. So I just make sure I read it the first time, I understand it, because I've learned if I go and try to click it again, I'm gonna have to subscribe and pay. But I just the reason why I don't want to pay is because I know those are the only art. If I were to read all of the LA Times, then it would make sense. But I just read one. I just read what you write, and so I'm
Hey,
just like,
check it out. The LA Times is good. Check it out. We got a lot of stuff about the election and COVID.
yeah.
You
But
don't want to die
I'm
from
only real
COVID.
worried about the soccer stuff.
Okay.
There's a bunch of other. I'm just worried about the soccer stuff.
Well, you better start worrying about COVID because it's coming.
It's already here. It's already here, man. So, but yeah, no, I mean, I love all the job you do. Guys, if you guys enjoyed this episode, make sure to give this a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts. You can also listen to this on Spotify, wherever you get your music. You can follow me at Gio Garcia LA on Twitter, and make sure to check us out on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook at LA Soccer Hub. For Kevin, this is Gio. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye, everybody.